We are live now.
So, hello and welcome to the session Hello ABAP Cloud. Probably the last session of the DevToberfest. Volker Drees and myself are giving you some insights regarding how we want to bring ABAP Cloud more consumable to the different personas working with ABAP Cloud. So because we have three personas that might be interested in using ABAP Cloud, first of all, there are many persons who have experience with the classic ABAP development. We call them here classic ABAP developers, and they have maybe years of development experience with technologies and concepts that are out there. And now we see that there are many new buzzwords, and the question is, how can we reuse the existing knowledge about classic ABAP? So for that, we had already also a different session coming from classic ABAP to ABAP Cloud. But we will also see later how we can improve the situation further. Then also there's a newbie, maybe a student, maybe someone who's not experienced with programming so far at all, or not with ABAP. And how can we get started here and in a comfortable and a more guided way? And last but not least, of course, also the expert. So if you know how ABAP Cloud works, then still there might be new features. And the question is, how can we introduce these new features? Or maybe in general, how can we speed up the development and maybe offer a context-sensitive assistance for the expert in ABAP Cloud? And if we see how much knowledge you need in order to be very productive with ABAP Cloud, including REP and all the other technologies, then it will take a lot of time to have the knowledge to be a real expert. But it is a little bit hard that you need to invest a lot of time reading tons of documentation in order to be in the situation that you can call yourself an expert. And the question is this required to do this in a more stepwise approach, which is not well defined, or could we even offer it to you a stepwise approach or support the different levels of becoming an expert? And this is what we exactly want to offer. So we want to enable you to see the supported scenarios as a newbie, for example, videos, how the supported scenarios and features work, and it should be very easy to create sample apps coming from a given context. And after you know where to start, it is important to understand how to get really started, how to do something in the system, how to create the first scenarios, and how can the result be shown in a good overview, in an understandable overview, and not across a lot of different artifacts where you need to find them in the packages, in the project explorer. And after you have created your first application via so-called creation wizard, and you see that the result in a good overview, the question is, what are now the next steps, the logical steps or the optional steps that can be used in order to extend the scope of the application to become a real enterprise application? And last but not least, of course, there are also all the details, the integrated tool support, reference documentation, which should be there, but somehow that should all be integrated so that you can come from this overview, where to start, and you can drill down until you see all the details. And now for the first step, where to start, we plan to offer an ABAP Cloud landing page inside of the ABAP Development Tools ADT. Here we want to create samples in the system locally, or we want to get started with our own scenario as a newbie. And then afterwards, for this getting started, I see all the scenarios which are available. I can maybe create a simple and easy executable creation wizard that helps to support an initial version of my application. Of course, this won't cover all aspects, but the idea is to get into touch for the first time, maybe with the technology, and to learn by doing that and to enhance it in a stepwise approach. And then we could see this result in an app overview, something similar like we have as of today, the business object viewer in the Relation Explorer for those who know that, but then more for the application end-to-end. And coming from this overview and the different things which are included in the end-to-end application, for example, Fury application, I want to understand which kind of follow-up activities are there. So for example, for those of you who are experienced with RAP business objects, it's highly interesting how I can integrate existing legacy code. How can I add additional behavior with determinations, validations, and actions? How should I apply authorization and in which places? How should I test and document a business object, or how should I consume a PO programmatically? And of course, there are further questions that relate to the UI OData service. How to visualize it or change the visualization, how to test the OData service, and how to extend the OData service end to end if it is, for example, provided by SAP. And then the last step, that's where we are maybe not too bad, where we are pretty good, is really the reference, the detailed documentation, the detailed tool support with code templates, auto-completion, and all that stuff. But to be honest, this is nothing that really helps you if you want to get started with something. That's detailed, maybe for the expert who knows how to create such stuff and then going into the details. So now, what about the newbie? The newbie pretty much needs all which I've just explained. And then the classic ABAP developer wants to reuse the knowledge and the onboarding. So therefore, it is really intuitive to add this information, how to come from classic ABAP to ABAP Cloud to the landing page. And then, last but not least, the expert doesn't need all the details or how the overview of the scenarios, because he probably knows, or at least the scenarios he or she already worked on. But we want to improve the productivity, and all the follow-up activities which we see here with number 3 helped also the expert to be more productive, because we have quick links how to create such stuff. And maybe also the wizards for creating a new application would be interesting. And then you're probably not interested in the detailed documentation which follows to the wizard, but maybe just to say, well, I have a table, I want to create a Fury app on that, and I go for it. I don't have to write this boilerplate coding by myself. But in addition, of course, also release notes and the roadmap information is interesting. So let's add this to the landing page as well. And of course, the samples might also be provided on different levels. So we could have samples for newbies, we could have samples for experts, but we could also have some samples for the intermediate knowledge base. Because the way coming from a newbie to an expert is also something that changes every release once new features arrive. And of course, it would be also very natural to link here documentation, guides, development journeys, videos, trainings, all that we have in one central place, which you see every time you want to work with ADT, or at least you have the chance to quickly go there. And now if we go a little bit into detail regarding this app overview and how the big picture for the different scenarios look like, I have here 3 examples. We start with the SAP Fury application. And here, mostly we start with a business object, or in read-only cases with a CDS entity without behavior. But in case it's a business object, we have the data model, the behavior, and also the actual runtime implementation with ABAP, where we can use then different things like the entity manipulation language and all that stuff. And then we create the service binding as of today. Service binding, service definition, and the service-specific projection. And then, of course, on top, which we usually do not mention in detail in all these our rep sessions in the past, is of course you also need to create identity and access management things on top, and also Fury related stuff like the Fury Launchpad tiles. And this is very similar if we create an OData web API and integration service. Here we need also an IAM app and the communication scenario, while the rest underneath stays the same. On the other hand, if we want to create an analytical application, then of course we also need the Fury Launchpad tiles and an IAM app. But of course, the implementation looks a little bit different. But following our model-driven approach of the overall architecture blueprint, we have a similar pattern here. That's also the reason why we can show this in this metrics. And the idea with Hello ABAP Cloud is now that we enable via so-called creation wizards the creation of such scenarios based on some reference artifact, for example, a DDIC table, in a very easy way. So wizard, for example, which can create such an OData before UI service, web API service, or analytical service maybe as well. But of course, this is not sufficient. but maybe sufficient for the developer in order to test what he or she created via, for example, the Fiori Elements Preview. But at the end, in order to deliver a productive app, of course, we need also support for creating the Fiori and security relevant artifacts. And going a little bit into detail, of course, I do not always start from the scratch or based on a data table. Sometimes I just want to create a business object. For example, I just want to use it as an API or without a Fiori app. And sometimes I start on an existing business object or analytical provider because maybe it was delivered by someone else, for example, by SAP, and I want to create my custom app, my custom UI service on top. So therefore, these different wizards is what we think might be reasonable to support you in order to create such scenarios. To be honest, the rep generator, which we have currently integrated in ADT, was just the beginning. We had to change a lot the infrastructure underneath, and now we can improve that a lot in the future and extend the scope. And for the other scenarios, we are also driving to create such wizards. So, and how could now the landing page look like? Here we don't have an interactive HTML website. It's just a PowerPoint slide, but it should give an overview what exactly should be here. So for example, we could have an overview of all the samples. So how to create a sample application, for example. How can I learn by trying it out? For ABAP and for CDS, we could offer scenarios which can then be created by such a small wizard. And you can generate this locally in your system coming from this ADT landing page. For example, how I can simply use ABAP to write something to the console. For a newbie, maybe interesting as a first starting point. An intermediate user might be interested in data types, ABAP unit, how to test and how to debug. An expert, for example, might be interested how the SAP LOW works and how I can do backend processing and maybe sending emails asynchronous. And then we can go ahead and talk about the business object, how we can here have different levels of knowledge and complexity, and of course also end-to-end scenarios like with Fiori or SOAP or HTTP or analytics. And after trying out this with sample apps, of course we want to really develop our own apps as a newbie, as a classic ABAP developer, or maybe even also as an expert. So I want to create my Fiori application, for example, based on the existing database table, or maybe completely from the scratch. And other things coming from developer extensibility are also maybe something we want to highlight, because there is existing content. How can I explore what is there? How can I consume it, or how can I extend it? We will see later in focus very nice demos also, how I can use a wizard to create custom Fiori apps based on existing SAP content in S/4HANA Public Cloud. And finally, of course, we want to learn more. We want to learn more about ABAP Cloud. We want to see what the newest features and the next features which will come as part of the roadmap, and how to come from classic ABAP to ABAP Cloud. But more about that later. First of all, I will go now again to ADT and think about or start the first three wizards. Or I will show you what the wizards, which do not yet exist, what they would create in order to explain the different personas, or the newbie especially, and the expert later on, the new features which are available. So I go to ADT, I just install it, and of course I need to create an ABAP project. And I take my backend system with the right client, username. So, and now I would like to start with this landing page. So I could see here, for example, an overview of the shortcuts which were just recently added by the ADT colleagues. how to create an ABAP project, how to create or to open new objects. And what I simply do now is I show you something which is not yet there, so it's somehow faked, but it gives you a early lab preview of what we plan to do. So I open the internal web browser in order to simulate the ABAP Cloud landing page here in place. And I open this one. So we want to see this one here, of course, later included in the ADT in a consumable way. So, and in order to see what would be the result of this wizard, I click here and see what happens next. I would open a wizard, and the wizard could show me the different options. So as a newbie, a simple hello world, simple hello ABAP Cloud, or these two other levels which we want to include. Based on that, we want to generate this ABAP class. And of course, if I go back now to ADT, Volker, I think the package was DMO flight ABAP Cloud, right?
Exactly, yeah, you're right.
Thank you. There we go. So, and this package would then be what I would then show what is created after I executed the wizards. So I think I will not go into this. Oh, maybe let's also do that. Simply, I would see then this result here. Give me a second. This is due to the workaround of having this landing page included here. So I will add it here. So there we go. Now I'm being prepared. So we would see that in this class here. Welcome to the basic scenario. Please press F9 to perform a class run. So this is a no-brainer for those who are a little bit experienced, but for a newbie, this might already be very interesting. Hello ABAP. And the second level, that would then be, what about data types, AUnit and debugging? And if I start a wizard here to create this, I would get a class like this one. And here it also says, welcome, and please press F9 to execute that. And then it would go to the debug perspective as usual, of course. So that has not been changed. And then, of course, in this example, I could also add some documentation, and maybe we have also the option later or in future to add links to other documentation, how this should work, that the breakpoint is obviously not used, which options I do have in the toolbar for the debugger, and that I can deep dive into this implementation and introduce, for example, internal tables and the loop statement, that there is an F1 help available, which I can execute or perform in order to see the details about the statement. I think those who are a little bit experienced with ABAP, it's not new, but for a newbie, it might be. And then, of course, at the end, it would also be nice to, well, to say, please execute a unit test. And then you would maybe see an issue, and the issue should be fixed. So we would motivate the newbie to interact with this example and to fix the issue in order to learn by doing that. And we see that the test is red. Of course, we want to motivate someone to change something. The output was unexpected. Maybe the exclamation mark is missing. Please fix and rerun the test. So of course, we're not doing that right now, but that should just give you an idea how we would maybe introduce ABAP a little bit more into detail, but just as an introduction to the newbie. But now coming to this third scenario, I think Andre Fischer explained a little bit this controlled sub LOW and the background processing. And of course, this should also be presented in such a generated class. So this one tells me, please execute the unit test via right click. So we execute the unit test. And then, of course, we also have here the breakpoint. And it tells me how the control sub LOW works. what is allowed, what is not allowed. It also tells me that I could play around by enabling code which should not work. So it will lead to a dump or to a contract check issue, which is then reported in a unit or in the feed reader. And it tells me, for example, also how to create and send an email. So maybe we can jump here. And then maybe sometimes I get an issue by that. But even here, we can learn more about the debugger and what does not work. So here, in this case, the technical configuration is missing. So probably nothing the newbie can completely solve by his own. But of course, there should also be other guys taking care for that. Yeah, and then this could also include then, for example, the BGPF, the background processing framework, which Andre introduced in the other session. So which helps us to understand how to process something in the background. So here in this scenario, the idea is that, I want to delete the test data of a given table. I want to send a mail to Volker that I'm doing that. And asynchronously, I want to initialize a table with new data, because initializing the data might not be critical by now for my business process and could be done later and takes a lot of time. Therefore, I don't want to spend the performance and the time for that. So I execute this asynchronously. And then the debugger opens again and everything is explained in a nice way. So, and of course, for that, we can even bring this for other features into ADT, and we have a direct integration into our tools. So that's basically the idea, combining our rollout activities, our documentation, and our investments into the tools, and having everything in one central landing page. So having said that, Volker, I think there are some more scenarios. Maybe you want to take over. How to create now a simple BO with CRUD behavior.
Exactly. Thank you, Marcel, for giving that very nice introduction. Also, hello from my side. Welcome to this DevToberfest session, and I will quickly share my screen and then I will go on. So yeah, same starting point, more or less, as also Marcel has shown to you. The landing page, which is our early lab preview. So I'm also making use of the internal web browser here to simulate this to you. And as mentioned by Marcel, I will now go on and take a first step into the business object world. So creating a simple business object with CRUD capabilities, and then we'll continue on the intermediate or even expert level with another BO that covers determinations, validations, actions, and so on. But we will see that step by step. So yeah, let's start with the wizard that does not yet exist, that generates such a simple BO with CRUD operations. So typical when you talk about a business object, then a good starting point is a database table, which at the end of the day stores your data and is the basis for the data model that is defined as a CDS data model, as you have seen in the overview pictures before. So the little example that we make use of here is around our flight and travel environment that we also use in the reference scenario. And here this simple BO only consists of a single node, which is the travel node. It has an ID, which is the unique key, and then a few attributes, agency ID, customer ID, and so on, begin date of the travel, end date, some amount fields, booking fee, total price, and so on. So this database table is the basis and the foundation for our data model that we use in this simple BO scenario. So I will jump into the data definition that is used, the CDSU, accordingly in order to define our data model. And as you have seen also in the example that Marcel has shown to you, we make use here of, we try to make use here of texts which explain you what is happening, what are the specific elements are doing in this example, and what is the important, basically the important aspect that one would want to know more about. Yeah, for instance, in this scenario here, it's a regular view entity, more or less, not really regular because it's a root view entity, and that is, for instance, needed in order to define a business object. And this is also explained here with this keyword, so that this is being used, and this is important in order to define a RAP business object. You can do some aliasing here of the names. In this case, we just introduced camel case. We could also have different names here. We can make use of add annotations. In this case, we annotate the amount field, respective currency code. This is needed, especially when it comes to rendering these amount fields in an UI and so on. At the bottom, we have some administrative fields that are used by the framework in order to maintain the last change, degraded by, and so on information. Very important, as also mentioned by Marcel, you can make use of the F1 help here in order to get information about a certain keyword, which is very nice because it's fully integrated and is very quickly available. Also very important here, mentioned, you can make use of the so-called element info. If you press the F2 button, then you get the element info popped up. And in this case, you can see that's the database table that I've shown you before. So you see this entire structure here. So just in case you want to review something or check on the certain data type or something like that. Also, the forward navigation works. If you do a control click, for instance, on this database table, then I'm also navigated into the database table that I have opened before. So this is the data model that we need to have as a basis for a business object. And then finally, to make it a business object, we need to add a behavior definition, in short, BDEF. And this is defined here. And again, we have a lot of explanation text here that tells you that a business object basically consists of two important elements, which is the data model and the behavior that basically injects then life into your business object. In this scenario, we make use of the so-called managed implementation type, which is kind of recommended in case you start with a greenfield approach. Because in a managed environment, a majority of the things that you need to take care about, like the CRUD operations, create, update, and delete operations, are handled then by the framework. So in this example here, we see that, again, the CDS view is used to define the data model, and this is referenced here. So we define the behavior for this CDS view. We can give it an alias so that it is then later on nicely and not shown and not just a technical name. We specify the persistent table so that the framework knows which table to use in order to write the data to. Again, here, a little introduction into the key handling, because key handling is a very important aspect, like what kind of key do you have, semantic key or UUID-based scenarios, early numbering, late numbering. There's many aspects, and it's also referred to in the documentation, by the way. But here we make use of a semantic key, and here we have some categories or attributes in order to specify that when a create happens, that this ID has to be provided, and after that it is read-only. And last but not least, we actually introduced that these standard operations, create, update, and delete are offered, and that's what then a BO consumer can make use of. And in order to make use of this BO and kind of to try it out, we can then also use a little test class, which we have prepared here as well. And this test class can again be run as a ABAP unit test, similar as Marcel has shown before. So we also run it as a test class, as a unit test, with switch the perspective. And same as before, we also see breakpoints here. So this pattern we try to kind of follow so that you see step by step what is taking place here, and so that you can kind of follow it. So first of all, we inject some data into the database. Of course, we don't, in this very easy example, we don't make use of test doubles. This comes in the second example, but here we want to keep it simple. And then the actual test is happening, which is doing a modify entity statement. That's a new statement, part of the programming model, which allows you to interact with your business object, in this case, the BO that we have just shown and implemented. And in this case, we do an update of a column, which is the description. We set a value for that description. We need to specify the key so that we identify the record. That's the one that was inserted here before into the database. And we change the description. It was initially Hello World, and we change it to Hello ABAP Cloud. And this we then try out. I will just step over it, and we see that we don't have any failed keys. So that's also one important benefit here of the ABAP debugger. You just hover over these variables, these identifiers, and then you see the current values and immediately spot any kind of problems that might have arisen. But here nothing has happened, so nothing went wrong. Everything is fine. We can just continue. We do a commit, which then triggers the save sequence and stores everything on the database. We check the Superc, which is a standard kind of result value in identifying if something went wrong with an ABAP operation. And this one is initial, means 0, that which obviously tells you that everything went fine. And then in order to check if really the update was taking place as expected, we select the database record back from the database and check on the new description. And we see, yes, it's Hello ABAP Cloud. So already the debugger tells us that this was successful, but also the test then checks that, first of all, the record was found, and that also this variable contains the value that it is supposed to contain. Yeah, you see all these CL ABAP unit assert statements here. That's the way of how you write unit tests, and to kind of perform asserts, asserting that a certain condition has to be fulfilled, and if not, then the test stops and gives you a red traffic light, like you have seen in the example by Marcel before. That concludes the first example with the, switch back to the other perspective, with the very simple BO. The next iteration is the second BO that I show you. Will combine these two aspects here, so intermediate as well as expert. And that one is, defines a data model that consists of 2 nodes, 2 database tables. This time again, we have a travel database table, this time with a UUID key, so no semantic key anymore, but a GUID. And we have a booking table, which is a child table underneath. Yeah, the cardinality is one-to-many. That is being defined in the CDS data model. So we see here, when we jump again into the travel BO, which is the root instance, the root entity, that again, this keyword root is being used. And we have a composition that defines, or that is a special association type, and which is used in order to define the composition hierarchy. And here we see the cardinality. It's a one-to-many cardinality. And we can again use the control-click forward navigation, for instance, to jump into the booking entity. And if we sync this with the project explorer, if we use this little link arrow, then we also see this highlighted when I'm inside this artifact. So the booking instance or the booking entity has an association back to the parent, which is the travel entity, and then again, defines a handful of fields. I think it's not very important, but important to mention it, that the on condition, in order to link these 2 entities, is defined in the child. So if I jump back to the travel one, you see there is no on condition because it is just on the target side, on the booking side. And with that, we jump again to the behavior definition, because I said before, you all know that a RAP business object consists of the data model as well as the behavior. Here again, a short text introducing you into this example with 2 nodes, with the 2 n cardinality. And again, we're making use of the managed implementation type. Today, we don't show you an unmanaged implementation, but this is also planned as part of the landing page. And for those that might wonder where actually you can implement your business logic in a managed environment, that takes place in determinations, validations, and actions, for instance. And that is also handled here in this example. Yeah, so besides the traditional create, update, delete operation, you also see that determinations, validations, and an action is used in order to inject some logic into the business object. So similar to the other one, we specify here the behavior for the individual entities. The same is happening underneath in the booking entities. So you see that in a RAP business object, there is one behavior definition for a business object, for a RAP business object, that defines the behavior for all the nodes, for all the entities in a single artifact. So you don't have individual artifacts for the behavior. This is all contained in this single artifact. And here we, as said, we make use of a different numbering paradigm. We make use of the numbering managed paradigm. Again, you can use the F1 key in order to get information about, okay, how does this work with this numbering thing, and what does this field stuff do? So you can all easily read this if you're uncertain about the exact capability and functionality. create, update, delete, same as before. And then, as mentioned, we use a determination. Determination is supposed to calculate a value to change the attributes. And then this one is executed on modify. That means it is happening kind of immediately whenever a modification is happening based on a certain trigger condition. And in this case, the trigger condition is to create. So that means whenever an instance is created, this determination runs. We have also a validation. Validations are supposed to check if a business object is in a consistent state. It can report back so-called failed keys. And if such a failed key is reported back inside a validation, then the framework knows that there's some problem with that BO instance, and this will result in an abort of the save. And the so-called interaction phase is re-entered, and then the problem can be fixed, and then a save can be triggered again. The validation happens on save, so when the save is supposed to happen, and again we have trigger conditions. So when the record is created, or if any of these fields, in this case the begin and the end date, are changed. And with that, we can also use the forward navigation, which is also supported here in the behavior definition, and we can directly jump into the implementation and take a look what this validation is basically doing. So as mentioned, it is supposed to validate the dates field, so the begin and the end date. So how is that happening? First of all, again, an entity manipulation language statement, EML statement, is used in order to read the entity, so the information from the buffer, from the transactional buffer, from the managed runtime in this case, as this is the managed BO.
Volker?
And it is.
Volker, sorry for interruption, but great details, but I think we need to speed up a little bit.
Okay, I was expecting that. So so this validation is then checking the data, and if something is not correct, then failed keys and reported entries and messages are returned back. So with that, then I jump, as I need to speed up, I expected that. I'll jump into the next example, which is generating a Fiori service based on an existing database table. So we now create an entire app through that makes use of the entire stack. And this is done, as said, based on a database table, and this has been prepared here as well. We look at this table. This time it's a customer, it's a travel table, so we use a customer table. And this is the mentioned generator that already exists, so that is being used already today, and is really available. And it is generating a UI service in this case, and we make use of this package. So we generate the stuff into the same package, and in there we can then specify certain attributes like a proper description. We can specify an alias, which is used in order to give the exposed entity set a better name in the OData exposure as well as in the behavior definition. All the rest we can leave as defaulted. We have a draft table because the scenario introduced also the draft capabilities. On the projection layer, we also we just specify the name of the CDS view. Then we have a service definition name, and last but not least, the service binding. So all these artifacts that you have also seen in Marcel's overview, these are generated by this tool. Here we get a summary of all what is being supposed to be generated, and then we just click finish. We could also have a transport assignment. In this case, I just generate into a little test package. Therefore, no transport request is needed. And then if the generation was done and executed successfully, I can quickly refresh the project tree, and then we see that beside our customer database table, a draft table was generated, and all the artifacts that are on top, like the CDS view and the behavior definition with the projection, everything was generated on top. So what I can do now right away, I can press the publish button, which does a local publishing. So from a developer perspective, I can easily then try out my OData service with the Fiori Elements app preview. This one I can trigger by doing a right click and then choosing the Fiori Elements app preview. And if everything goes well, then I see my application that allows me to maintain my customers. And here I've already prepared a little record. This was already present in the database table. I can create now new records, as many as I want. So with this, you have seen in 2 minutes, I guess, or 3 minutes, I was able to, based on the database table, create a working Fiori application that allows me to maintain data in my database table. Next and last demo that I will provide is the one shown here on the right-hand side, which is an extension scenario. In this case, I'm generating a Fiori application on top of an existing business object. It's not an S4 business object. It's a demo business object that we use in our reference scenario, but nevertheless, it is based on a so-called released interface. Yeah, so we make use in this scenario of the demo flight example, and it comes with a released, or in this case, we locally released it, but technically it could be released here, comes with an interface BDEF. And based on this, I can now create and generate a customer UI. Yeah, so this means, same wizard here, the text is from the old one, so please ignore that one. This one allows me now to generate a full projection layer, an entire projection layer on top of what is present in the standard app. Yeah, and I just provide a package here. Again, I need to do some rephrasing. In the interest of time, I think I can quickly do that. So this BO consists of 3 nodes. Again, it's a travel scenario, booking and booking supplements. I can quickly edit here some aliases. Travel, and then this one goes into booking so that we have a little nice names here, and booking supplement. Oops. The rest we can leave as before. So we have a projection BDEF, behavior implementation class, we have a service definition and a service binding. We can all leave this default values here. We see again a summary of the artifacts that will be generated. So we can run this one. Again, this is also a lab preview. So this generation wizard is not yet available. It's only the first one that I've shown to you, the one that is based on the database table. Here we generate a few more artifacts because it's, as I said, the business object consists of 3 nodes. So therefore it's a bit more to do. However, it's also quite fast. So here we are. We can collapse this and we see that after refreshing that we have a complete service projection on top of the existing interface view. Yeah? This means looking at our set data definition, we see it selects the data from the interface view from the more or less SAP standard business object. And we also see that value helps have been generated into it. This is because this interface view has corresponding annotations, which kind of identify or mark certain value helps as templates. But in order to quickly run and show you the example, I publish this again. And yeah, with this, I can then also open the app preview like you've seen before. And after a few seconds, you see I have a fully working travel application with 3 nodes. With value helps and fully CRUD queue enabled like you know it from other business applications and S4 applications. And with that, I hand back over to Marcel.
Yes, thank you, Volker. Getting the right button, there we go. Thank you so much, Volker, for all the demos. So Volker gave, of course, a very nice overview and lab preview, like I did. And of course, not everything which we would like to have is already there in place and was even not possible for us to show it. So for example, the result of the wizards would be shown also in some kind of app overview, as we discussed. So Volker clicked through the different artifacts, but of course there should be some kind of overview which perfectly explains the big picture, like service, model, and implementation, and all that stuff. And then you would be able to navigate from there, from a semantical representation and not from a technical package representation to that. And yeah, so then maybe let's go back to our slides. So of course, this landing page is something we would like to work on in the next releases. And our plan is to offer this with the next big on-premise release, but also, of course, stepwise approach in the cloud early. For now, there's also some learning journey available which you could use. So this is something I should highlight. So the learning journey is already available, and to get a certificate is also available. It, of course, is not completely for free, the second part. And of course, this information would also be something that you would access via the ABAP Cloud landing page. And the same holds for the other information here. So the ABAP Cloud roadmap and the SAP documentation and everything should be accessible from the ABAP Cloud landing page. Because what I forgot is the fourth point here, learn more. So how would I get more information? We would like to point out here also a link to the ABAP Cloud documentation, which is of course in progress. So we see here, why is ABAP Cloud in place? What is the ABAP Cloud development model? We would see, and I guess you did that a lot already in the other sessions, to see the ABAP Cloud development model map, the ABAP Cloud map with all the details, also with some kind of interaction here. We would then also, from this landing page, like to see the release notes and the roadmap. So I don't know if everybody knows, there's a nice roadmap out there where we can see the ABAP Cloud roadmap information, exactly coming from the terms mentioned in this ABAP Cloud map, UI services, integration services, the implementation and modeling layer, and other stuff which we provide here, reuse services, all our qualities. And last but not least, of course, also for the classic ABAP developers, a mapping from the classic ABAP towards ABAP Cloud. And with our last contribution here, we just see that we have our video being available. More than 5,000 clicks so far, Volker. And yeah, so if you saw that session or not, there is now even a better resolution of this video available with with a good resolution. You could watch that one. And of course, all this content should be somehow in a very consumable way represented here and accessible via this central landing page. Yes, having said that, for the time being, you find further information here. Hopefully, the next session, we don't need to show this slide, but we maybe could show it in the ABAP Cloud landing page integrated into ADT. Thank you so much for attending the session. I guess there will be some questions which we could answer, but from our point of view, we presented everything we have. I hope you enjoyed the session. So it was not a very easy session for us because we need to explain something which is completely not there. But I think, and we think, it's very important to show what we are looking for, because I think the demand is very big. REP is out there, ABAP Cloud is now out there, and all this new stuff. And we want to explain to you how we're going to support everyone in the future to build up the knowledge for this new technologies, which will probably be the way how we, for the next decades, how we implement ABAP-based applications.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. Thanks to Marcel, and thanks for everybody listening. And yeah, as mentioned by Marcel, I hope it was not kind of too confusing, was somehow possible to follow what we tried to explain. And also, yeah, looking for feedback about this approach, because as said by Marcel, most of the things that we've demoed today are not yet present, are not yet existing. And yeah, it would be interesting to know and see if this is the right direction we are heading for. As per the questions, I think there's one question mentioned in the chat that a colleague has copied over. There's one question that says, let's say we have a BTP ABAP runtime and on-premise system connected. Can I run an on-premise RFC in background process started at BTP ABAP runtime using the class methods specified? So I think this refers to the BGPF, the background processing framework that Marcel has mentioned. Which is exactly possible, so that you can do remote calls, transactional remote calls with other systems and in the background processing. Of course, you need to make sure to take care about the error handling. So in case the system cannot be reached or the system returns any error messages in the return structure or whatsoever. Of course, in general, we would recommend to think about moving this into an OData service and instead of an RFC calling an OData service, but RFC should also work. And as said, you simply need to take care about the instances that might fail, and in order to then decide whether you want to reprocess them or maybe put them into a queue so that maybe if one gets stuck, then the entire queue stops, because you might have dependencies and you don't want to continue if one got stuck and something like that. So this is maybe the kind of the design question you need to decide, but technically that should work.
Yes. So remote communication, which should transport transactional changes of the current session. That's a very complex topic, unfortunately, but not due to ABAP Cloud. I think it is in general how to do that in a consistent way. Volker perfectly explained it. So if it is just reading the data, you can do that nearly everywhere. But if it is writing the data from your current transaction, writing that to a different system, similar to a replication, but more on a business level, then this would be exactly the right approach to do it in the BGPF, in the background processing framework, because doing it somewhere else either leads to data inconsistencies in the system or leads to data inconsistencies across the two systems, because there could be a failure. And using BGPF and later the monitoring, AIF monitoring behind that, will make sure that we have exactly once in order capabilities and that this communication does not fail and does not lead to inconsistencies. Thank you for the question. So, Volker, are there now questions?
Yeah, there just one popped in. Can we call BDC in sub-public cloud? I don't know what BDC means, to be honest. Batch data call, maybe? I don't know. So maybe that needs to be kind of mentioned more precisely.
Yes, if you do not have a chance to detail the question here in this short time, of course, we are also very open to answer questions, maybe not on YouTube, because it's pretty hard to access that, but maybe on the community page. Karine offers a summary of all the different sessions, and there are many questions we already answered or are in the progress. So you could also detail the question there, and then we will provide a good answer to that one.
Exactly. So it looks like there is no other question at the moment. I think Dan.
Yes, I would be very glad, Volker mentioned that as well, if you could provide us some feedback, if you think the ideas are good, or if you think we don't need that. If you could share your feedback on this community page, because for us, there will be a very big improvement and a very big investment. We think it is totally necessary. But yeah, so we are still in a very early stage, and you could give us feedback in order to influence the future for you, we provide for you. So Volker, I think if there are no further questions.
No, there are no further questions. No further questions at the moment.
Then sorry for interrupting you. Now there are 8 minutes left.
It's okay. I got used to that. No problem.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and enjoy using ABAP Cloud. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day. Cheers. Bye.